You can get away with being a pretty nasty coworker if you're good enough at sports. Bicker with coaches, pick on teammates, people will tolerate it. Hell, they might even celebrate it as long as you never stop winning. Yes, I'm describing Michael Jordan, but right up until that last part, I'm also describing Gary Payton. Like Jordan, Payton ranks among the greatest players in NBA history. Like Jordan, he started fights and made enemies with his team. Payton's Seattle Supersonics came as close as anyone to disrupting Jordan's Chicago dynasty. But they didn't. Those Sonics won a lot, but they didn't win it all. And while Gary was still in uniform, they stopped winning. What once got dismissed as Gary being Gary started to register as something else. It turned into beef.
Oh, real quick. Secret Base is on Patreon. Subscribers get exclusive videos and podcasts, early access to good stuff, and input on what experiments we should try next. And you can watch videos like this one without any ads. Anyway, back to this video.
From day one in the NBA, Gary Payton was an asshole. That's his word, not mine. Payton attributes his fearless, pugnacious personality to his father, Al, whom neighbors in Oakland called Mr. Mean, and who raised Gary to be Mr. Mean Jr. Gary was a rookie on the 90-91 Seattle Sonics, but refused to act like one. He ran his mouth at Coach Casey Jones, he ran his mouth in the media, and he ran his mouth at teammates, even after they tried to check him. Even after Xavier McDaniel put him in a sleeper hold. But that boisterous personality worked for Gary. Payton had been a loudmouth since long before the NBA and always backed it up with superior play. So he wasn't going to stop in Seattle, and again, it basically worked. Payton was a Sonic starter from day one, and within a few years he blossomed into a star. Seattle point guard Nate McMillan willingly diminished his own role to let Payton run the show. By mid-decade, Payton was a perennial all-star, building the resume of elite ball handling and defense that would one day make him a Hall of Famer. And the Sonics ascended along with him. This was an era of monumental success, flecked with beef. Payton and his co-star, Shawn Kemp, butted heads with new coach George Karl. Karl was every bit as bellicose as his point guard, which generated intermittent blowups, but also fed a sort of mutual understanding. As for teammates, well, Gary was Gary, pestering older players and bullying younger players. But the Sonics won. Teammates called him names, but also a motivator and a competitor. They said Gary made the Sonics great, and maybe also prevented the Sonics from being great. The most notorious example came in 1994, in the middle of Seattle's historic first-round upset loss to the Nuggets. Payton and teammate Ricky Pierce had a confrontation that some say included serious threats of violence. But Seattle rallied in the years to come and made it all the way to the NBA Finals in 1996. While Payton got grief for his shortcomings, the average fan adored him. The beef was a B story. Gradually, that team wore down. The Sonics traded Shawn Kemp in 1997. Coach Karl left for Milwaukee in 98. The golden era ended without a title. But Gary remained. He turned down bigger offers to sign with Seattle well into his 30s, the last sports superstar standing in the city. Approaching the millennium, the Sonics would rebuild around Gary Payton. New coach Paul Westphal presented as a more easygoing leader than George Karl. He arrived in 1998, pre-approved by Payton. By all accounts, Payton exploited that to commandeer Seattle's offense in a way that irritated teammates, and that's just the basketball. Rashard Lewis and Jelani McCoy were rookies on the 99 Sonics. Lewis told the Knuckleheads podcast that they got the Gary Payton experience immediately upon arrival.
And by the time we walk in, Gary Payton dribbling the ball up the court. As soon as we walk in, he stopped in the middle of the game, and he looked at us, you mother, and just started going.
Veteran big man Vin Baker was Payton's new co-star and closest friend. Payton called him an out-of-shape crybaby. Don McLean was a role player on that team, and observers accused Payton of stonewalling him, and it sounds like McLean agreed. At season's end, the Sonics were 500 and out of the playoffs, a huge drop from their 61-win finish in 1998. The Sonics considered trading Payton. They had a deal on the table. Instead, Seattle kind of doubled down on the Gary experience. Payton even seemed to issue a roster-building blueprint. While several incumbent Sonics fled town, Seattle GM Wally Walker interpreted Payton's request thusly. In came Vernon Maxwell, a veteran with experience winning rings and experience causing trouble. Payton wanted him. And in came Ruben Patterson, the self-proclaimed Kobe stopper, who said he would be the next Gary Payton. Gary was happy to have him, but eager to shut him up. If Payton was calling the shots, well, Gary felt he had done a good job. Seattle's revamped roster had a lot of attitude and a lot of defense, like him. He guaranteed no one would get out of line. And that, I will grant, seemed to be the vibe early in the 99-2000 season. During halftime of an exhibition game, Coach Westphal upbraided Payton in front of the whole team, and Gary responded by taking the critiques in stride. Payton battled Ruben Patterson in private and roasted him in the papers, but it was seen as mentorship, Payton style. A December 99 Sports Illustrated article included numerous coworkers gushing about Payton's maturity. Nate McMillan, now a Sonics assistant coach, said Gary was leading by example. Coach Westphal said Payton had learned to harness his edginess. And this was coming from someone Payton had recently screamed at. That incident happened during a game against the Lakers in December. Down 16 in the fourth quarter, Westphal waved the white flag and rested his starters. Payton went off. After a private post-game meeting, Westphal said Payton's demeanor didn't remind him of Henry Kissinger, but he also wouldn't trade Payton for Henry Kissinger. Coming from Paul Westphal, that is apparently a compliment. In any event, the Sonics were winning at a clip comparable to the George Karl years. They were distancing themselves from the dread of '99. So Payton's behavior, private and public tirades, maybe putting a welt under Vin Baker's eye, that could all file under the heading of Gary being Gary. But then things took a turn. The Sonics slipped in the standings. Grouchy vibes began to fester until boom. Sunday, March 26th, 2000. Payton and Vernon Maxwell got into it during practice, and their argument turned into a locker room fight so intense that both picked up makeshift weapons, and multiple teammates got hurt trying to separate them. Supposedly, Payton and Maxwell made up before their next game, which, I don't know. Locker room scuffles happen, but I think people swinging chairs and dumbbells constitute more than just things getting a little heated. And for what it's worth, the beef did not end there. Payton's modern-day explanation for the fight is actually that he and Maxwell were too close.
We were really tight. We did the same thing. We hung out the same way. You know what I'm saying? We did the same thing. We partied the same way. We did the same thing. And we clash. When you have two guys like the same and they clash, somebody's gonna have to give.
Maxwell, meanwhile, has heard Payton's version of the story and on Gilbert Arenas' show sounded more than ready to keep the fight going.
But I swear to God, I'll beat your motherfucking fat ass, big gut motherfucker. You better stop talking so much, dude. If I see you, dude, it'll be on, dude.
According to Maxwell, the confrontation began because Payton picked on Shamond Williams, a young point guard Seattle had brought in to maybe replace Gary someday. That was perhaps not an isolated incident. Jeff Pearlman's book about the Lakers dynasty includes an anecdote about Payton fuming because Williams made a clutch shot, like instead of celebrating. And in Seattle's 2000 playoff series against Utah, everyone could feel tension between Payton and his young understudy. Payton berated Williams on the court, then whined about not getting the ball. Noteworthy here is that Coach Westphal seems to have addressed these issues by benching Shamond Williams. So, yes, the Sonics made it back to the postseason, and Gary performed quite well in said postseason, but they lost in the first round, and they did so grumpily. Payton had to wear all of the above again. And again, the word was time to just trade this guy and move on. More than ever, Gary's teammates sounded fine with that. Instead, Seattle kept Gary and irritated him by almost trading his favorite teammate, Vin Baker. Coach Westphal had pushed for a Baker trade, which made things rather awkward. Mere days into the 2000-2001 season, Westphal sensed he'd lost his locker room. He offered to resign on the spot, to which Payton and company replied, "No, don't. That would make us look bad." Once again, everyone just waited for the tension to snap, and that happened on November 21st in Dallas. During a timeout, Westphal said something Payton didn't like, to which Payton said a lot. I assume that's "I'll slap your ass" and not "I'll slap your ass." But anyway, here's perhaps the most telling part of it. After the blow-up, Westphal suspended Payton for the following game. Then Payton kinda apologized, so Westphal rescinded the suspension. A few days later, Paul Westphal got fired. His replacement was fascinating. Nate McMillan, Mr. Sonic, Payton's old veteran teammate who had once handed over his point guard spot and earned Payton's respect, now an assistant sliding into his first ever head coaching job. If anyone could salvage this arrangement, it had to be him. The question was what would happen when Payton caused another hullabaloo? And the answer arrived promptly. January 17th, 2001 against the Suns. Payton got annoyed at Ruben Patterson and went after him intensely enough that Jason Kidd, an opponent, felt compelled to break it up. And that lingered. Here you can see Payton dialing up the vitriol so much that the Sonics had to call timeout. It kept going on the bench and then in the locker room. Coach McMillan had to act. He suspended Payton, breaking a long streak of games played, even after Payton apologized. Thereafter, word from the inside was that things had turned. Under the McMillan administration, Payton had found a way to be a competitor and a teammate. But things were also changing outside the locker room. That same January of 2001, Howard Schultz, the Starbucks billionaire and Sonics fan, bought the franchise. Payton thought that was cool, kind of like a Mark Cuban deal, an involved owner. But Schultz didn't sound too keen on Payton's beef history. And after that Ruben Patterson blowup, which happened days into Schultz's tenure as owner, GM Wally Walker didn't sound firmly against a Payton trade. Indeed, the Sonics tried to trade their superstar again that summer. They got so close that Payton felt compelled to issue a statement thanking Sonics fans. But no trade went through, which made 01-02 extra awkward. There's some bitter irony to it. That whole year, reports echoed the sentiment that Payton had turned a corner. McMillan's Sonics got back into the playoffs. And yet, while that flavor of beef dispersed, Payton and Howard Schultz were developing a new one. Yes, that's Kenny G. Payton obviously did not like his new boss calling him a constituency and then trying to trade him in that 01 offseason. Schultz, meanwhile, had gained extra insight from inside the organization and didn't like it. Schultz came to believe that Vin Baker's well-documented issues with alcohol were enabled by Payton. He visited one of Payton's summertime charity events and objected to Gary's behavior there. Payton's contract was one season from expiring, and observers started to believe that no matter what teammates or fans thought, Schultz would not give him a new deal. This was not Payton's impression. The star and team owner met at a Seattle Storm game during the summer of '02, and Payton came away believing he had been promised a contract extension. But then he didn't get one. Entering training camp, Payton still felt like a lame duck and tested his employers with a brief no-show. The Sonics did not budge. Schultz said, "Hey, we still want Payton to retire as Sonic." Gary said, "Whatever." In early 2003, the Sonics finally traded Gary Payton. Poetically, it was for Ray Allen, who once fought Gary. After a decade of picking fights, Payton had beefed with the wrong guy and at the wrong time. Payton didn't return to Seattle until the following season, after he had joined the LA Lakers. Gary took that opportunity to reconnect with Coach McMillan, and he got a very warm welcome from the Sonics crowd. Payton said he held no grudge for fans or players or coaches. Schultz, very much so. He had said Schultz knew nothing about basketball. And decades later, Schultz sounds like he kind of agrees.
If you had to do that period over again, what, if anything,
I would not
you do
have bought the
differently?
team.
You wouldn't have?
No.
Gary is less subtle in his assessment.
Howard is a con man.
So Gary Payton wouldn't be Gary Payton if he didn't speak his mind. But it went too far at times. Payton outlasted most of his beeves in Seattle, but ironically, just when he seemed to find the right balance, it was too late and new ownership had already moved on from him. And perhaps that final beef with Howard Schultz helped overshadow the others, because Schultz would play the villain in the long run. With notable exceptions, most former teammates still respect Gary. Most Seattle fans still adore Gary. You can get away with a lot of beef if you win, and Gary Payton did that. He just stuck around long enough to find out what happens when you stop.
Thanks for watching this episode of Beef History. These names you're seeing on screen are people who subscribe to the Secret Base Patreon. They get early access to stuff, exclusive videos and podcasts, and other cool things you won't find on YouTube. But since you're on YouTube right now, here's more stuff to click on while you're here.